Hey everyone, it's not Prince of Queens. It's Spacepan. Prince asked me to make another guest video, and I'll be addressing a topic that you've almost certainly encountered, the notion that the men's movement is a mirror of feminism. And if you're not already familiar with me, you know that I will say no, it absolutely is not. In fact, I disagree with this notion so strongly that I maintain that it is an unfair characterization of any group within the entire manosphere, whether we're talking about the MRM, MGTOW, PUA, TFL, incels, mythopoetics, or literally any person outside of these groups for which an argument could be made for their inclusion in the manosphere. It is an unfair comparison. And I disagree with this notion so strongly that I maintain that absolutely nothing having anything to do with the manosphere will ever constitute a mirror to feminism. As a radical MRA, I will be defending a radical position. Now, if you caught our first Gaytriarchy podcast this year with Karen Strawn, you may recall that we began the conversation with a discussion of intersectionality. The reason I brought this up is that it is, for very good reasons, an approach to issues that has been torn apart, mocked, discarded by most people outside of the SJW NPC bubble. However, I knew that Karen has offered us examples of intersectionality that are both logical and useful from an anti-feminist perspective, the most obvious examples being drawn from the black male experience. And there are many concepts within feminism that actually, in and of themselves, have some merit. It is in the application of these concepts that feminism fails. The fundamentals of standpoint theory, that individual characteristics such as your age, sex, gender, and experiences affect your point of view, are innocuous and practically non-statements that are then co-opted by feminist theorists. Consciousness raising is the primary goal of all forms of advocacy, but the feminist application that popularized it is best understood as basic bitch Ganocentrism. Now, if the charge of being a mirror to feminists is true of anyone, it will be true of me, particularly because I have no shame in turning SJW concepts against them. There are two reasons that feminism has been successful. One, and very most importantly, it appeals to our gynocentric nature as humans, but also it engages in abstract bait-and-switch tactics. The basic idea, the bait, tends to make sense, and the pseudo-intellectual sleight of hand, the switch, is rarely examined closely because it is unnatural to challenge our instinct to protect and provide for females. Imagine gynocentrism as the notion that 5 equals rape. The feminist theorist then says, well, 4 is almost 5. It's 1 away from 5. So since 4 plus 1 equals 5, 4 plus 1 equals rape. I maintain that the manosphere mirror charge is like arguing that all of this is wrong because a feminist theorist said it. They are perceiving that because the MRA is also saying 4 plus 1 equals 5, they believe the MRA is just like the feminist. This is because they haven't perceived the heart of the problem. They are still gynocentric. They still fundamentally believe that 5 equals rape. So when the MRA says 4 plus 1 equals 5, they hear 4 plus 1 equals rape. Have you ever noticed that MRAs are strawmanned as saying men are oppressed? This is why. Now, we all understand that Hitler believed that 2 plus 2 equals 4, and that disavowing him doesn't require us to reinvent mathematics with a Hitler-shaped void. Yet many anti-feminists seem very comfortable throwing the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to feminist theory. Put another way, feminist theory is a weapon employed by the feminist. So why aren't we taking their loot after defeating them? Weapons themselves are not right or wrong. They're just pointed in the right or wrong direction. The underlying justification for feminism's focus on the condition of women is that women were historically oppressed. In principle, this justification is perfectly valid. Everyone, whether you are blue, purple, or red-pilled, accepts this. The point of departure is not in the validity of the argument, but in the truth of its basic premise. The blue-pilled believe that women were and are still oppressed. The purple-pilled believe that women were oppressed. The red-pilled believed that women were never oppressed. But all three groups agree that insofar as a group has been uniquely disadvantaged, there is justification in having a movement that focuses specifically on that group's issues. Now, compare men's and women's issues. I believe this video is going to be sufficiently long without my reinventing the wheel here, so I invite you to pause the video and list the top 5 to 10 issues for each sex. Now, look at the issues in your women's column. Are any of these as important as the issues you've listed in the men's column? Got a pay gap that isn't real, sexual violence, which men experience more of, domestic violence, which men experience about as much of, reproductive rights, which men have fewer of, women choosing to prioritize careers over motherhood, women choosing not to go into politics, women choosing not to wear outfits men are required to wear, resulting in their oppression at the office by the cold, misogynistic air conditioner. Now look at your list of men's issues. If any one of these were an issue affecting women to that degree, would it not immediately become the single most important women's issue? So a lot of MRAs refuse to simply state that men clearly have it worse than women. I am not one of them. Although I would not use the term oppression, I would maintain that it is very obvious that if any advocacy is justified based upon group identity, men's rights advocacy is far and away the most important and makes all other civil rights causes, past and present, look like jokes by comparison. Humans have demonstrated a willingness to foster sensitivity for women, for people of all racial groups, for gay people, for the disabled, for different religious groups, and even for fantasy races and aliens in fiction, but not for men. And this is why it took the Manosphere to cause people to throw away the entire concept of advocating based on group identity. Everyone was complacent as this approach was applied to countless different groups for decades. Yet, the moment we are challenged to apply this standard to men, so many of us find it easier to just say, well, fuck the standard. This is the difference between what I call a coffee shop anti-feminist and a true anti-feminist. I am an anti-feminist not because I think their tone or their style or their presentation is ineffective. I am an anti-feminist because the basic premise that their worldview is based around is false. If I believed it were true, I would dye my hair blue and shove a crucifix up my ass too. If the things feminists believed were true, how could you blame them? Wouldn't hysteria be justified? So many of the same people who cheer when Ben Shapiro says, "Facts don't care about your feelings," reject feminism not on the grounds that their facts are wrong, but because they don't like their tone. And these are the people who make the accusation that the Manosphere is simply a mirror to feminism. They are ignoring the reality that the Manosphere has all of the facts on its side and are instead reacting emotionally to the idea that men are capable of suffering and that a lot of them need help. And this is why it is so critically important to understand that the problem isn't feminism. The problem is Ganocentrism. Patriarchy theory is powerless to explain male suffering throughout human history. It instead erases that suffering by assuming the experience of male rulers to be the typical male experience, and it cannot explain the success of feminism without downplaying the role men had in supporting it. On the other hand, Ganocentrism explains traditionalism, it explains feminism, and it explains the creation of feminist theory. We created ideological frameworks with chunks of valid reasoning, the bait, that protected us from challenging our true nature, which is the core of the switch. In order to identify the pieces of these frameworks that are useful, we first have to name the aspect of our nature that corrupted them. Otherwise, whatever we try to replace feminism with will simply lead us back to where we started. So the reason that nothing within the Manosphere should be seen as a mirror to feminism is that feminism is based on comfortable lies, whereas each Manosphere group represents an acknowledgement of harsh truths. Among these harsh truths is the simple observation that things needed to get this bad in order for the question of men's issues to even be considered. A sign that the men's movement will certainly fade away long before the need for it does. And it will never be a mirror to feminism, because the dominance of feminism is based on Ganocentrism, a universal aspect of human nature that we may never be able to correct. In order for any of these groups to achieve what feminism has achieved, we would need to see an unprecedented evolution in the character of man so drastic as to render all predictions worthless. So, thank you for listening. This is Spacepan. Likes, shares, subs, and most importantly, comments are appreciated. Keep on keeping on, and have a nice whatever, wherever you are. Thank you.